Hello, and welcome to the National Archives Foundation's virtual program series. I'm Patrick Madden, the Executive Director of the National Archives Foundation, and thank you for joining us from home today. The National Archives is our nation's memory, and through this programming, we're hope and pleased to share all of the wonderful 15 billion records that exist in the National Archives through these spirited conversations. If you're new to our programs, welcome, and I hope you are receiving our American Experience emails or History Snack emails for kids and families. If not, sign up on our website, archivesfoundation.org. Of course, the holiday season is right around the corner, so be sure to bookmark nationalarchivesstore.org for all of your gift needs this season. Our featured speaker today will be taking questions, so I want to make sure you know how to ask your questions in the YouTube chat. You can add your question at any time. You don't have to wait for the Q&A. And to make sure you get a little practice in, please give us your hometown and state, and I'll give you a shout out later on. I see there's a number of folks who already who have been with us before. They know this trick, so happy to have you added, and we'd love to know who's watching from around the country. And also, please, at the end of our program, I'll be announcing some new programs we have in November and December, so you're not going to want to miss that. If you can't stay to the very end, obviously, you can catch us on our website. And now our featured speaker, Dawn Hammatt, is the director of the Eisenhower Presidential Library Museum and Boyhood Home in Abilene, Kansas. She's been in her current role since 2016, and prior to the archive, she managed the design and fabrication of a 22,000 square foot exhibition for the Mississippi Arts and Entertainment Experience. Working in the museum field her entire career, predominantly in New Orleans for local, state, and private organizations, Dawn has overseen disaster recovery efforts following 2 disasters. Her work has chiefly been in collections management and administration. Dawn, are you with us today?
I am. Thank you. Thanks, Patrick, for inviting me.
Okay, I don't know if we have your video yet. Let's see. We'll make sure we got your video going. While that's queuing up, it's great to have you on. Before we let you jump in, let me ask, how are you doing? How's the team doing there during the pandemic?
So I think we're doing pretty well. As you know, our site is closed to the public as the other presidential libraries. We've been doing some amazing work via telework. We've positioned all of our educational programs online just like this, and we've been seeing a lot of positive feedback about them.
That's great. That's great to hear. Well, I know we're all eager to get our sites open safely. It seems like it'll be a little while before that, where everybody's back open. But in the meantime, we're happy to have you today. I know you have a terrific virtual tour to take us through and some exciting new things people might not know about that's there. So I'm gonna sign off for a little bit and let you take it over, and excited to hear what you have to share.
Sure, thank you. So thanks for having me here today. I decided that it might be interesting if we did a quick tour of our exhibits at the Eisenhower Presidential Library. So here's President Eisenhower. He was born in 1890. He's our last president that was born in the 19th century, and he was raised right here in Abilene, Kansas. He served as president from 1953 to 1961, and our exhibits are rather new, so I thought we'd share that today. So on our next slide, I'm going to introduce you to our campus. This is our statue on the campus. The campus is 22 acres and has 5 buildings. It's a rural location, and Abilene has less than 7,000 residents. We're the only NARA Presidential Library that owns and operates the Boyhood Home as well. So next up is a little video. Let's see the video, please. This is the place of meditation where Eisenhower and his beloved Mamie are buried. As the drone goes up into the air, you can see a grain elevator in the back, and it sort of speaks to the rural location of the Eisenhower Presidential Library. The 22 acres are quite lovely. This is the Boyhood Home. This is where Eisenhower was raised. There were 6 boys and mother, father, and grandfather that lived there in that home. The campus sort of grew up around it, but that's where he grew up, right there. And here is our museum building. Originally, the museum building was built as a memorial for the service members for World War II. And it changed over time after Eisenhower became president. It became a presidential library as well. And a grain elevator in the background. The drone's going to spin around in a moment, and directly across from the museum is the library building. Here's the library building. This is where our archives are stored. This is where our research room is, where scholars would come to access the holdings. And Eisenhower was instrumental in the design of all of these buildings, actually. And here's what I refer to as the parade ground. I figure the general would appreciate if I called it a parade ground. The 22 acres includes a large lawn that we enjoy. And we're going to end with our statue of the general. So here we have the museum, of course, and as I mentioned, we're going to go ahead and show our new exhibits. Hopefully when we reopen, you can come and visit us as well. So in the next slide, we have the entry lobby of the museum building. As I mentioned, this was originally built as a museum for the service members. So this lobby area hasn't really changed, but I do want to point out our new admissions desk. Do you see the silver pieces on the front of the desk? That is actually a reclaimed part from an older gallery. It's a balusters from a sunken gallery. And that was repositioned, replanned during this new exhibit phase. But I was really pleased that we were able to repurpose some of the original architectural pieces. And on the ground, you can see the shield patch. That's in the terrazzo. And that is the patch, the insignia patch that was worn by Eisenhower's headquarters in Europe. Next slide. When you enter our galleries, you enter into the Abilene years. This is the place where we introduce you to the whole Eisenhower family. In the center of the room, you can see a dining room table, and on that table are placemats where you are introduced to the entire family. All of the boys in this family went on to have wonderful careers, and we thought that meeting them around their family table would be an interesting way to say hello. The mural on the back wall, Eisenhower is all the way to the left above his father's shoulders. And in the next slide, you're going to see a close-up. This is my favorite picture of Eisenhower. He's camping nearby with some of his friends. And the fact that somebody brought a camera to a camping trip is just astounding to me. I love that photo. Further on in the galleries, we are introduced to Eisenhower's West Point years. And in that case to the right of your screen, you can see his Letterman's jacket and a very small photograph of him playing football. He played football for West Point until he was injured, and then he continued to coach football at his different posts around the country. And then in this slide, we can see Eisenhower in his first duty station at Fort Sam Houston, where he met his beloved Mamie. And Eisenhower and Mamie had sparks flying as soon as they met each other. But Mamie had other dates. You know, it was different. The courting was different then than it is now. And she already had some dates scheduled. So she kept going on those dates. But Dwight, a very smart fellow, he went and hung out with Mamie's parents when she was on dates with other fellows. And next slide, please. And this, the little image, the little shield-shaped box is what I believe to be our most unique artifact. That is a piece of their wedding cake. Yes, their wedding cake. And if we move further into the exhibit, for each gallery you enter, there is an introductory panel much like this with a big image of Eisenhower or Mamie, whichever is appropriate. And then also is a quote on each introductory panel. We felt as though Mamie and Ike really could tell their own story, And we pulled out quotes and put them throughout the galleries so that they could tell their own stories. And we leaned on them quite a bit when we did this. Next slide, please. In this gallery, we have moved into America Enters World War II. And if you notice, the room is a little bit darker, the lights are a little bit more dim, and it looks a little bit more ominous. This circle on the floor, we're going to talk about, actually, let's talk about that on the next slide. This is a film. It's projected from the ceiling, and we received a lot of feedback from educators that said they have challenges teaching the global nature of the war and how long the war lasted. So this film is called World War II, A Global Conflict. And at the bottom of the circle is a time counter. So as you watch it, you can tell how much time has passed. And there's a map of the whole world on it. The colors change as the Axis and Allied powers move. There are videos and sound bites that pop up that help maybe elaborate a particular part of the story. This has been an incredibly effective tool for us to help people learn about the global nature of World War II. In this slide, we see our D-Day planning table. So this table was actually used in Suffolk House in England. This was one of the tables that was used by the military leaders at SHAEF headquarters. The interesting story about this is we don't know what happened to it directly after the war, but during Eisenhower's presidency, one of his friends saw it at the British Dental Association's headquarters in London. This person bought it, shipped it to President Eisenhower at the White House, where he set it up in the White House for people to see before he shipped it to his museum in Abilene. We're really pleased to have that to tell the story of D-Day planning. In this slide, we see a film on the right, and beneath the film is an important artifact. It is a model of the Mulberry Harbor. This model was used to tell Churchill, from the civil engineers, to tell Churchill what the engineers needed to do to build an artificial harbor for the Normandy coast. This model was given by Churchill to FDR, and we are pleased to share it in our library. The film above is not only about the planning of D-Day and the invasion itself, but also sustaining the troops afterwards. And the really important piece of this film is that some of our staff and our exhibit designers were able to use some previously undigitized film from the National Archives in Washington, D.C. And that film footage changed the whole feel of this film. And now that film is digitized for users in Washington. So that was a big benefit for everyone. I'm really excited about that. As I mentioned, we use quotes from Eisenhower and Mamie. And we feel as though this quote, this is the last thing you see in his military career, "I hate war as only a soldier who lived it can," really encapsulates his presidency and his administration. After his time in the military, he wanted peace for Americans and the whole world. And we felt like this was the most important thing that our guests needed to see before they left Eisenhower's military career. And beyond it, you can see that the colors have changed. There's the campaign memorabilia in front of you. The colors have changed. We've gone from sort of a military gray tone, gray and silver, to a presidential blue and gold in the next area. But first, we get to meet Mamie. This is Mamie's gallery. And we get to tell the story of Mamie and how she was a traditional housewife of the 30s, 40s, and 50s, but she was quite progressive. She was a woman of her time, but she believed that if you, as a woman, needed to work outside your home, then that was great. You needed to do that. She supported you. But she also understood that her role was as a partner for Ike. She understood that in the military, the spouse played a large part of the service members' success, the officer's success. So she admitted that she was Eisenhower's partner. And in this gallery, we talk about how she used fashion to express herself, but she also had a lot of charitable works that she was interested in. And quite frankly, she was absolutely interested in equality. And in fact, she desegregated the White House egg roll for all citizens. And moving on, this is an introduction to the presidential gallery. So as we move into the presidential gallery, the exhibit changes from a chronological experience to a more thematic experience. And right here, this closest gallery is about waging peace. This is Eisenhower's international agenda on how we have a global peace. And in the next slide, we see the space race. So as I mentioned, we do a thematic approach in this gallery. And one of the topics that we deal with in an international agenda type of situation is the space race. All of these places have a map, so our guests can understand where in the world we're talking about. But I really liked this map because in the 50s, you can think about it in sort of a soft terms, that it was great and poodle skirts and great music. But it's really important to recognize that it was challenging and difficult and scary. And so this map shows the shadow of Sputnik over America. And I think it's a really effective tool. In this part of the gallery, we have moved on to Eisenhower's domestic policies and promoting prosperity. It's important for us to recognize that most Americans had a greater opportunity for higher education at this time, home ownership, car ownership. And so we do talk about the prosperity that Americans saw at that time. In the next slide, however, we do talk about some of the more challenging situations that our country faced at that time. So this section is about school desegregation. And in the case to the right, that's really difficult to see in this photograph, we use some of the letters from our holdings from people who were both for and against segregation. In our next slide, it's just really looking back towards where we came from to show you the mid-century modern type of feel that we've re-examined from the original structure. And if we turn around again, we're facing the end. And this is, we're going to get closer to it in a second. But as I mentioned, we really leaned on Eisenhower's words. So in the next slide, you can see that this particular sort of ending is Eisenhower's farewell address. And different words are highlighted so that you can see President Eisenhower's image within it. And the farewell address, I might remind you, is where he tells us to beware of the military-industrial complex. The final slide of our exhibit, this is the quote that our guests see before they leave. Eisenhower wrote several essays for the Reader's Digest after he left the White House. And in this essay, he was writing to American youth, and he was telling the American youth what they needed to do to have peace and justice in this world. And he ends it by saying, "Good luck then, I for one believe in you." It was really important to us that we included this forward-thinking moment as an ending place. In our next slide, however, we're going to see some of the other buildings on the campus. This is our library building. The circle beneath the flag is actually a buffalo head. This building incorporates a lot of Kansas details, I suppose. There's some blue stem grass in the brasswork, and Eisenhower also had a hand in the design of this building. And in the next slide, you can see our reading room. This is our reading room. It has some beautiful, beautiful mid-century modern pieces in it. Our next slide is the boyhood home. This is sort of a side view of it. As pieces have been added on to this building, sections have been added on This building was fairly small when all of the boys' mother, father, and grandfather lived here. And this is the formal parlor in the home. The boys were not allowed in this room. This was the very special and grown-up space. But the next slide is the family room, the family parlor. So the whole family would congregate in here at the end of the day. They would read the Bible, and the piano on the left, Ike's mother bought this piano before she left Virginia, before she traveled to Kansas and settled in Kansas. She taught all the boys how to play. Ike was not among the best of the students, but she taught them all. And then the quilt on the daybed closest to the camera, that was actually created by Eisenhower's great-grandfather. And then the crazy quilt pillows have the family names embroidered on them, and that was made by Ida. This is the place of meditation. So Eisenhower again helped with the design development of this building, and this is where he and Mamie and his firstborn son Dowd are buried. This space is meant, the name of it is the place of meditation, and it is meant to be a moment of quiet and reflection. This is the interior space. On the floor, the slab on the left is where Eisenhower is, and right is Mamie. You can't actually see Dowd in this photo. The camera is not situated quite right. But Eisenhower also had a hand in the design or the choosing of the design for the stained glass windows, and they are just splendid. This is our visitor center, where when you come to visit us, you will start your visit here. And inside, in the next slide, is also a museum shop. And in the museum shop, of course, you can buy souvenirs, but we also have some things that are more indicative of Eisenhower's presidency. So Eisenhower had a sign on his desk that said this: "Gently in manner, strongly indeed," and we had it recreated. He believed strongly in that motto. So this is a bird's eye view of that monumental statue that we saw a moment ago, and it says "Champion of Peace" at the bottom of it. And I believe there's one more slide.
The proudest thing I can claim is that I am from Abilene.
So that's Eisenhower was very, very proud to be from Kansas and from Abilene.
That was terrific. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. That was fun.
We've got some questions queued up. I want to welcome folks and remind them how to ask questions. We've got some in the YouTube chat. We've got folks from all over the country. I can't even list all of the different suburbs of Washington, D.C. There's Washington, D.C. greater area is well represented. We got Fort Worth, Texas, Bozeman, Montana, Weehawken, New Jersey, let's see, Tallahassee, Florida, a couple other places in Florida, New York, Nevada, Delaware, my friends in White Bear Lake, Minnesota, they're always with us, Pennsylvania, Dublin, Ireland, Dallas, Texas, Minneapolis, North Carolina. So we've got a lot of folks who are Eisenhower fans with us today. And before we jump in these questions, so please put your questions in the chat. A couple of things that popped into my mind as you were talking, and you know, in the last few months, we've talked a lot about legacy of our founding fathers and presidents with the national conversations happening. Going through developing a new exhibit, was there new scholarship that you all looked at as informing how you did the exhibition?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that question. So we did, of course, lean on some new scholarship. However, as I mentioned, we really wanted their words to shine through. And so we leaned on their writings. We leaned on audio of them, writings from them more so than new scholarship. What I mean is when we got stuck, when we were writing the script and we got stuck, somebody would say, well, what would Ike have said about that? What did Ike say about that? And so really when we had maybe a challenging situation that we needed to find the right words for, we leaned on Ike and Mamie. And that was wonderful because we could go to the holdings of the library to get, the primary source material and answer that question. However, there have been some great books that have come out on Eisenhower recently. In fact, just this summer, Susan Eisenhower's book came out, and it's called How Ike Led. So that's been a really good book for us all to read. And there's several out. I'm trying to make sure I say the right name. I don't want to say the wrong name. Eisenhower, Ike and McCarthy by David Nichols, and The Age of Eisenhower by William Hitchcock. Those are just a few. We're also hearing that there's going to be a few new ones coming out about Ike's role with women's rights and moving women's rights forward. So I'm looking forward to those as well.
Terrific. And you started to touch on this, but folks are using the holdings, the researching. Folks might think, oh, that's a while ago, everything's been researched. Can you talk to us a little bit about the holdings and folks who are coming to do research there?
Sure. So we have about 600 to 800 researchers a year from all over the world. And I have personally sort of seen an increase in interest in women's roles in both the military and the presidency. So we have about 26 million papers. They are from Eisenhower's presidency and also his military career. It includes about 450 of his associates. And it's really important to remember that Eisenhower was an analog-born president. So we do have some of our holdings digitized, but we're looking forward to being able to digitize a lot more in the future.
Great, and I'm quite confident we'll get this question, so I'll go ahead and get it out of the way. Do you have a favorite object or document?
So I may have been anticipatory for this this question, right? So here is an image of my favorite document, my favorite piece in the holdings. This is what we call the in case of failure letter. Eisenhower jotted this down in pencil. It's on a relatively small piece of note paper. For some reason, he dated it wrong. It says July 5th. No one really knows why he dated it wrong. But in this letter, he says, the service members did everything they could. They trained, they fought as hard as they could. And if anything fails, it's my fault. If this event fails, I am to blame. And he just stuck it in his pocket. And we are really pleased that someone had the foresight to keep it. And it made its way to the library at some point after D-Day, clearly. And I am just so honored to be the keeper of this particular object.
There are a few very special documents like that in the archives, and that is one of them. These sort of alternative history. If this doesn't happen, sort of preparation speeches, letters are written, and that's definitely one of them. And it just shows him true and true. So we've got some questions queued up for you from the crowd. First one is, who was the artist who painted the lobby mural?
Oh my goodness, that's the one question I wasn't prepared for. I can't. Well, it's actually two different artists. Because it was originally a military museum, the two larger murals were by one artist, and those are military in nature. And then when it turned into a presidential library, they added two longer, sort of like a film strip type of Eisenhower's career. If you send me your question, I will absolutely tell you the answer. But that's the best I can do on this moment. I'm terribly, terribly sorry.
No, that's a good punt, and a reminder that folks can contact you and contact the library if they have specific questions. So we'll see if we can give you a little bit easier one here. Are there family members involved with the museum?
Yes, absolutely. So Eisenhower has 4 grandchildren. They are all involved in some way or another. Several of them are very active with the Eisenhower Foundation. And we actually ask them to participate in educational programming from time to time. As I mentioned, Susan has a new book out, and she was one of our guest speakers just a few weeks ago, actually. So They're all involved in different ways that meet everybody's needs.
That's great. Did Eisenhower think of himself more as a president or a general?
Eisenhower thought of himself as a general. So after Eisenhower left the White House, he requested from President Kennedy that his rank be reinstated. So he was, I think he felt more comfortable being called general. He is buried in his service uniform. He is buried in an Army service member's casket. And he is, interestingly, he only has one bar of ribbons on his uniform as he's buried. At the library, we generally refer to him as General Eisenhower, unless we are specifically talking about something during the presidency where we'll say President Eisenhower.
And sort of on a related question, was he always a Republican? Was he very partisan?
No, he was not partisan. At the time, the military officers did not vote, especially for president. They felt like the chief of our military forces, that they didn't want to get involved in that. So he did not, he was not a partisan fellow. And so he did not closely associate with either party. In fact, he was courted by both to run for president.
Let's see, every time I have one of these conversations with a presidential library director, I learned something. I did not know the military did not vote for the president. Did Eisenhower maintain his relationships in Kansas, friends, relatives?
Yes, he did. He had a handful of childhood friends that he maintained contact with throughout his life. He had one friend, Swede Hazlitt. Swede talked Eisenhower into applying for the military academies. And then Swede went to the Naval Academy. And Swede and Ike wrote to each other throughout their lives. And Ike sort of looked at Swede as a sounding board. And then he had a lot of friends as an adult. He had a lot of friends here in Abilene in particular, who he worked with to set up the Eisenhower Foundation and to raise money for the museum to be built and for the library to be built. He was absolutely involved. I love hearing stories around town of people say, "Oh, I remember when Eisenhower came," and this one lady was telling me about, she remembers one time Eisenhower came and he gave her a lollipop. And I went, "Is it this photograph?" And yeah, that's her in the photograph with Eisenhower, and he gave her that lollipop. I love those stories.
I bet. Related to this on the friends and family, you mentioned the property. Obviously, we saw this the drone video, multiple sites, buildings on the property. But there was a farm, right? And is that still part of the property or not? Is it still operating?
Do you mean the farm that you saw in the drone?
No, I was just saying as a
Eisenhower's farm.
The Eisenhower farm, yeah.
Okay, so the Eisenhower property was about 2.25 acres, something like that. So it really wasn't a farm in the grand sense of the word. It was sort of a family subsistence farm. Father worked at a local creamery. He worked very hard. He worked over 60 hours a week. But they had a small farm that was for their own vegetables and their own subsistence. And no, it no longer exists.
Okay. Can you talk to us a little bit more about the Civil Rights Act moment, and are there any interesting stories about his interaction with LBJ?
Oh, well, so Eisenhower actually, we know that he was involved in the crisis at Little Rock, right? And he really wanted to do more. In our holdings, we have little notes that he wrote that said, he did what he could do. He should have done this. He wished he'd done that. All of that is on the side. He did have the first civil rights bill since the Civil War. He did appoint African Americans to executive positions. He did include African Americans in important roles and positions as he could. He appointed a justice, a United States justice, who would support desegregation. He desegregated the military. Truman set it up, but the military didn't completely follow through. And Eisenhower made the military comply with that order from President Truman. He desegregated Washington, D.C. And so he acknowledged that there was more to be done, but we feel that what he did do set up the civil rights movement for the 60s. It sort of set a platform that they could launch from in the 60s.
Jumping back to the holdings, you mentioned that I think it had to do with the port that needed to be built is an item that's actually from the FDR library. Is that correct? Is it on loan from there, or they?
No,
FDR...
it was transferred from the FDR Presidential Library to the Eisenhower Presidential Library sometime in the past, and I don't know why. But we are honored to keep that.
Mm-hmm. And are there any paintings either on view in the exhibit or in the holdings?
Paintings that Eisenhower did?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes. So we have 20, 30 paintings that Eisenhower did himself. Eisenhower was introduced to painting by Churchill as a way to sort of calm yourself and focus yourself. Both of those gentlemen painted for recreation. We have a Churchill painting in our holdings as well. So there we have a couple of Eisenhower paintings in the exhibit. But once we reopen, we're actually looking forward to having an art show of Eisenhower and Churchill paintings, and sort of talking about them as world leaders and these artists as well.
Well, and George W. Bush has made quite a second career as a painter and monetized that with a couple of books, I think. So there could be something here.
Yep, world leaders in painting.
That's it. Excellent. So let's see, another question here. Why did the Eisenhowers retire to Gettysburg?
So that's a complicated question, but the Eisenhower family originally settled in Pennsylvania when they came from Germany. So the Eisenhower family actually settled near where the Gettysburg farm is currently. When Eisenhower went to Gettysburg early in his military career, he really felt some sort of a connection to it. He felt very comfortable there. And I believe that it was just sort of a comfort. It was close enough to Washington so that while he was president, he could go back and forth with ease. And you know what? He really loved it there. He felt at home.
Can you talk a little bit more about Mamie's causes? I think you mentioned equality, but are there more? Can you give us a little bit more insight on her, either
Sure.
as First Lady or otherwise?
Well, let's see where my ramblings take us. Mamie had some health issues for her whole life. Both she and Ike had heart problems, and so during the presidency, she became very, very involved with the American Heart Association. During the war, when Ike was in Europe, she volunteered at different wartime volunteer opportunities. She knew that it was important for her to show herself at that time in that capacity. Mamie was really interested in, she loved people. And she would get a lot of letters. Frankly, she would try to answer all of the letters she got, but she got a lot of letters that were asking for donations to charitable causes. And oftentimes she would just make donations, even if it was small, because she knew that it meant something to these people, that the president and the first lady were interested in their cause and supporting their cause. She loved people, and she loved to support people when she could.
And I understand he served as the president of Colombia. Is there a segue to that? You said they retired to Gettysburg, so he'd come to Washington, but similar to New York City, or?
I don't think he felt really at home in New York City. I don't think that he enjoyed, like from a I feel successful point of view, his time at Columbia. He did a good job for them, and he was proud of what he did. But he didn't last long in that role. They invited him to be the leader of NATO. So he quit working for Columbia and went to work back as a civil servant. He really was a civil servant in his heart. He served his people.
We've had a couple of mentions about the memorial and the new memorial in Washington. Did you and the library have anything to do with that? Can you just give folks a little bit of context?
Sure. So, of course, we know that the memorial just recently opened to the public. It's quite lovely. I haven't had the chance to go in person since it's been completed. The Presidential Library worked with the Eisenhower Memorial Commission to create this online educational portal that is really quite content heavy, and it's now with the Eisenhower Foundation. So the Eisenhower Presidential Library and the Memorial worked together to create this timeline and like a video archives, really for anyone, but also for educators to use.
Terrific. Well, I have had the chance to see it as it was being built, and at least drive by the finished product. And I can report there were people visiting, even despite the situation. So I'm sure as folks come back to Washington, that will be definitely an important stopping place.
I hope so.
What about Camp David? Are there artifacts in the holdings from Camp David?
I don't know of any off the top of my head, but that's interesting that you mention it. I did want to talk about Camp David. So this particular retreat, prior to Eisenhower's administration, was called Camp Shangri-La. And at the time, during the worry, the concern about communist expansion, they didn't think that Shangri-La was an appropriate name. So Eisenhower renamed it Camp David after his grandson. We have a lot of photos from them at Camp David, the public ones, the ones that are publicly available. But I don't know of anything off the top of my head about Camp David. That's an interesting question.
Okay. What about artifacts in the library related to the development of the interstate system?
Great question. Yes, we do like to talk about the interstate system. We do have some documents from the interstate system development. We're really interested in showing sort of the dichotomy or the juxtaposition maybe of Eisenhower during his early military years was involved in the Transcontinental Motor Convoy. And during this convoy, the military was trying to decide if they could mobilize, from the East Coast to the West Coast, what would that take? And guess what? It was horrible. It was very difficult at the time. It was 1918. We have a lot of photographs in the holdings about the motor convoy. And then during World War II, Eisenhower goes to Europe and sees the Autobahn, and those two things click to him, and he says, we need this interstate system. So of course he's involved in that, and there's a place not far from where I am right now that says it's the first part of the interstate system that was poured and laid.
So much like the Berlin Wall at the Reagan Library, you have a piece of concrete that's
we should do that. We should do that.
Excellent. What about his relationship with West Point?
So Eisenhower, I'm not sure that he had a relationship specifically with West Point after he left West Point. They are all sort of interconnected to some degree, but I don't believe that he had any specific relations with them.
Okay.
I know somebody's going to tell me I'm wrong on that, and I would like to learn. If I am wrong, I would like to learn.
Well, we definitely have some very knowledgeable fact checkers. We have learned as we do these programs, as you can imagine.
I am open and willing for information.
Terrific. What about his relationship with Douglas MacArthur? Can you comment on that?
Oh, MacArthur. That was, so I think maybe what I'll do is talk about Ike. Ike was a humble man who was not particularly showy or ostentatious. And so those two men were really just sort of opposite ends of the spectrum for humans, right? And so they, of course, had to work together through their military career, but their personalities were vastly different.
Sure. Well, we're almost out of time here. I did want to give you a chance to see if are there any other topics we might not have covered that you want to mention, or as folks, obviously we don't exactly know when things are going to reopen, but things at the library or the sites there you have in the queue for 2021 that they should look forward to, whether they're looking at it online or have the chance to visit in person?
Sure. So we have all of our educational programs, lifelong learning type of programs are online currently. And if you go to our website, eisenhowerlibrary.gov, under the events tab, you can see all of our upcoming programs. We have some great ones scheduled for next year. We sort of wind down around Thanksgiving and Christmas because everybody's busy. But our 2021 plans should be uploaded to the web soon. And I think we have some great things planned, even in an unknown future, even in an online future.
Great. And you said for the time being, you're doing educational programs online, and that'll remain consistent as a resource.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for the time. You've really inspired us with the library, the new museum. We want to encourage people, when the opportunity is there, to come and visit. And obviously, in the meantime, visit you virtually or on social media. This has been great.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very delighted. Thank you so much.
Terrific. It was a great program. Thanks so much. I've got a few closing announcements. We appreciate, obviously, all of our members, the corporate council, our donors who are with us. If you're not a member of the National Archives Foundation, you can join by visiting our website today, archivesfoundation.org. And I don't know about you, but I hear those sleigh bells and I can feel like you're warming up your credit card for Black Friday and Cyber Monday. Please include the National Archives store on your list of virtual shopping trips this season. You probably already know this, but we have the best gift shop in town and online, nationalarchivesstore.org. And I mentioned those programs coming up later this month and next month. On November 16th, we've got a terrific program that's looking at, in celebration of Native American Heritage Month, we're going to look at the Indian treaties that the National Archives just digitized for the first time. They are available online and searchable. There's a great new research called DigiTreaties. Got an expert who put that together with the archives who's going to walk us through that. That program's at 5 o'clock. And then on the 18th, we've got the director, one of Don's colleagues, the head of the George W. Bush Library in Dallas at 5 o'clock as well. And then in December, let's get on your calendar, riddle me this. On December 7th, we're going to have another trivia night, and we're going to tie that to our shopping night that we usually host in the building. So we're going to have a series of special discounts at the shop and giveaways. This is one you're not going to want to miss. On the 10th, we've got a special Mars chocolate tasting presentation, a tour of one of their factories, a little behind the scenes. And then the 17th, we've got Rebecca Roberts, curator of programming, who will be giving us a virtual tour of a brand new cultural site in Washington, D.C., Planet Word Museum. They're one of our new neighbors, just a few blocks from the archives. Remember, you can keep up with our programs by visiting us on our website and social media. Remember, what is past is prologue. Until next time, on behalf of the National Archives Foundation, thank you for joining us today.